Yo, what's good, y'all? We bike. Back like your nigga in the passenger seat, leaned all the way back. Back like Fat Joe, lean back. Ignore me, y'all. I'm on one today. I just saged my house this morning, this afternoon. Ignore me, y'all know I'm with the shits, but it is what it is. But welcome back to another episode of this lovely podcast called Introspective Thoughts with your host, me. You see my name at the bottom, it's down there. But I have a special guest here with me today. It may be slightly problematic that I'm getting ready to say this, but she's the first Black woman that we've had on this program. But we only 4 episodes in, so it's okay. We getting there. I got some more people coming. It's all good. But we have the first Black woman on here. She is one of my colleagues here in this doctoral program, a former Spelmanite. She is also a consultant and analyst and an educational leader seeking to disrupt, I'm gonna read her bio, y'all, as she put it, seeking to disrupt and dismantle injustices, and policies that negatively impact the Black community, specifically focused on issues impacting Black and Brown communities, such as civil rights, education policy, and social justice. And not only that, she is also the creator of African-American influence apparel brand called the Fruit of My Ancestors, where she says that I am the dreams and hopes for all those who came before me. As an African-American woman as an African-American woman, my family has been part of the fabric of America for generations. My ancestors grew up in the Jim Crow South and they worked tirelessly, yes, and made a way, yes, God, out of nothing, so that she may have opportunities to this day. The fruit of my ancestors is to honor them and to share the strength, tenacity, and resilience of Black people. As her mother always taught her, there are those that gave that she may have a better life, and it is her job to provide the same for the next generation. The fruit of my ancestors is a connection to our past, so that way we move forward with strength and dignity. Now, if you ain't got a picture of who I'm getting ready to bring up, just know that this is a phenomenal Black woman. She came to turn some heads, so be prepared for it. Have your notebook out, have your paper ready, because we finna get into it. Welcome to the show, my colleague, Miss Leanna Pearson. Hands together up on there for that real quick. Hey, what's poppin'?
Well, first and foremost, I didn't know I was the first Black woman on your show, so I take that as a badge of honor. Thank you very much.
Turn up.
Okay, talk about it. And listening to you read my bio, I'm like, oh wait, that is me. I did put that.
That's me. Y'all see me?
Yeah. Because normally you just do the work. It's not until you hear it and you're like, oh, me.
Right. Okay. Look, and we need that kind of encouragement in this mess of what 2020 is. Because sometimes you got to take a step back and look at self and be like, self, and self say, you did the damn thing. Because as the dude said on that, Black women, they're just, sickening, amazing. I can't even find the correct dictionary terms. I'd have to pull out thesaurus.com just to find the words to describe what Black women been doing, are doing, have been doing, will be doing, thinking about doing, thought about doing, and it's gonna get you to do before the end of the day. Come on, somebody, today.
Talk about it.
Yes. All right, so on today's episode of Introspective Thoughts, now, last time we spoke, we talked about spirituality, and the time before that we talked about relationships and some of everything, and the time before that we talked about some very philosophical things, this idea of I versus we. This week, or this episode, or whenever the hell you see this thing, we're gonna talk about everybody's favorite term, what white people hate and what Black people love to push in other folks' face, this term called privilege. And if it ain't nobody else that I know on the face of this planet who is more qualified to talk about this idea of privilege, it is this woman here. So let's get into it. Let's talk about it. So, Miss Pearson.
Yes, sir.
So me and you know what this idea of privilege is. Can you tell the lovely listeners or watchers what your idea of privilege is and how it has manifested itself for either you as a benefit or as a detriment? I know that was a long loaded question, but yeah.
No, it's fine because as you say and ask the question, of course, the doctorate hat came in, and I was like, dang it, can I take that hat off just for once? Um, but that hat came in terms of thinking about there's layers to this thing called privilege. And so, as a Black person, and then as a Black woman, when I first looked at privilege, privilege was solely like the have or the have nots. And then it became the white folks have and the Black folks don't really have. And then it became white folks have, Black folks have. Where do you fall in the spectrum of Blackness on having? And then as a teacher, it became no, we all have, but can we honor what we do have and what we are working and striving towards? Now, to call a spade, you could be white and poor, you still have privilege. You might not feel you have privilege because you're poor, you're less fortunate, so you feel like your life's journey aligns with that of people of color. But I promise you, if you were able to go to the Goodwill and find a pretty suit and go to a business meeting or go to an interview, they wouldn't know unless maybe you spoke or unless they saw your pedigree in the schools that you went to and the people that you were around. But your skin color straight up gave you that advantage. So it gives you that privilege. But when I think about privilege, and I guess it's because of sitting in the role as an educator, it's 2020. The first time that I was able to say that I have privilege was in 2017. So what is that? I was 29 years old the first time that I was actually able to say, no, as a Black person, there's a lot of privilege that I have. And I know that is troublesome when I say to Black folks, like, hey, we have privilege. We just have to recognize what it is and speak on it. And again, I guess it's because I'm from this school of call a spade a spade. Like, I can recognize when I go into a classroom that there's a level of educational access that is my privilege. There is another spade a spade. I'm a light-skinned Black woman. I don't necessarily think and define myself as a light-skinned Black woman. I just define myself as a Black woman. But in communities of color, colorism is so real because of white privilege that my community reminds me, no, you have that privilege too. And my students remind me that you have that privilege too. So, Ms. Pearson, how can you use that privilege to help us or to let me see that Black people can be as amazing and better than you?
I like that. I really enjoyed that definition. And it's interesting that you brought that up because I can think of several different instances in where I've had to recognize my own privilege. Now, as you said it was 2017 when you recognized that you had privilege. For me, it was probably a couple years. No, it was a year before that. It was 2016. Yeah, 2016. I remember doing this is back when I was a RA at UT. I remember doing a bulletin board on privilege called Check Your Privilege, where I had like, it was 15 different categories of things. So if it was like you were European American versus a person of color, you were straight versus homosexual, you were, religious, or you were agnostic or atheist, blah, 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 blah. And it wasn't until like months before I did that I had to really sit down and listen to myself and listen to the things that I say or that I do or the way that I coach or the way that I mentor or the way that I teach people. And it made me realize how much privilege I do have in that. And like you said, Black people don't necessarily understand that they do have privilege. And in that, this is where people shout out to Kimberly Crenshaw for coining this idea and this term of intersectionality based from a Black woman's perspective. People don't understand how they still have privilege even in racist ass United States in November of 2020. And so it's interesting that you brought that up as far as like folks just now recognizing their privilege. But I guess my question then is like, what made you recognize that you had that privilege? Because for me, it was the fact that I went to UT and I was working on a bachelor's and then a master's, you know, immediately, or that I'm a man, you know, or that, you know, I may have more wealth or disposable income than somebody else. But like, what was the thing that made you realize that, oh, I am very privileged in what I have and what I can give?
So it's funny, as you like get to that question, I was thinking about it. It's the dynamics of the English language. Let's be real. Because did I realize I had access to things before? Yes. Did I realize that I did things different from some of my peers? Yes. I had benefits. I was able to go and be in different programs. I just had resources. So that was the thing. I had resources. So I wasn't looking at it as a privilege. It was this assumption that if I could have it, like, y'all could ask me, or I could tell you, or make it readily available. So I wasn't thinking in the gaze of privilege. It's not until I would say I really started doing this work. And in doing this work, teaching white folks that they have privilege and realizing that, wait, some of the things that I'm telling you, you are privileged to, I myself have been privileged to those same things. And recognizing that, okay, maybe it's not a black white thing for this specific instance, but it could be socioeconomic privilege that I have in this instant. It could be a cultural privilege that I have in this moment. But let's go back. Even with my introduction, you said my work is about race. It's about black and white. So having that conversation up front and making white folks recognize, like, hey, this is what you have access to. This is why you have power. That's your privilege. I have to realize I have privilege, but I have privilege, and the distinction is my privilege is not connected to power, right? In my community, it's connected to power. So with Black folks, it might be connected to power. Think of it, to make it simpler, think of it, we talk about Hollywood. We have A-list celebrities that everyone knows. But ask a Black person to give you their A-list celebrity, right? And then go ask, Gabrielle Union, she's in a spotlight now, but let's also be real. White America doesn't really know who Gabrielle Union is. But in a Black community, she's an A-list Hollywood actress. But in a white society, she probably, I wouldn't even put her on the B list. She's probably still like down there on the C and D list. So you have privilege in the community that you speak for, or the community that you represent, and you can go forth and use that to claim your seat at the table or to fight for your seat at the table. But again, and I guess I still have to unpack this, and I still have to find like how I best want to explain it. But everyone can have privilege. The question is it privilege tied to power? And in my opinion, the word privilege is too nice for white people. And I don't know what the word is to change. Like the whole discussion of the way we talk about slavery in the United States, like saying the stealing and robbing of Black people from their homes and bringing them to a country to work in forced labor, or killing them and committing genocide. That's harsher language that white America would understand. But in saying things are as slavery or the transatlantic slave trade, like trade is like this amicable feeling and agreement. Mm-hmm. There's nothing amicable about taking somebody from their home and forcing them into labor, or in their safe way, indentured servitude, which is still a nice way of putting it. and basically building a country and society where those people are still not recognized as humans. You might look at me and say I'm a human being, but you don't recognize me as a human. So that's why Black folks have an issue with the word privilege, because my privilege is not connected to power for those in a level of authority, but my privilege is connected to influence. And I literally just thought of that, like in saying it. My privilege is connected to influence in my community. So that's the difference.
Ooh, you hit on a lot right there. Oh, I don't even know where to begin. Um, okay, because I want to hit the portion about privilege and power because that was very poignant. But I also want to get to the point of like privilege is too nice for white people because that is 100% facts. Like, and we know this because we've had a shared experience of, well, not even so much as a shared experience, but we've had I heard of an experience that you've had where you've had to deal with, people who do not consider themselves white for some odd reason, at least in the context of the United States. I get it in a sense, but not really. But in this situation, you have people who don't necessarily recognize their privilege, but I think that's also part of the issue as well with white people, is because a lot of white people, and this goes back historically as well, the very first thing that comes to my mind is white women who think that they don't have privilege because they were still under the subjugation of their husbands. But it's like, no, girl, that's not how that works. You still have privilege because of this thing. You see this here? All these different colors. You have privilege because of that. And that's just that alone. And it's not your fault that you have that privilege. It's just the way that society, our society, Western society as a whole, was structured and was built. We come out of a patriarchal society that came from England, that came from Spain, that came from Italy, that came from France, that came from name any, Western European power that had an influence on what goes on in the lower 48 United States, and that's where your idea of privilege comes from. But I think a lot of people get stuck on that idea of I don't have privilege because they don't understand, like you just said, there's privilege connected to power. And when people don't think that they have that power, they don't think that they have privilege. And I think that's where a lot of Black folk get fucked up too. It's because they think, especially a lot of Black men, and this ain't no shade to Black men by any stretch of imagination, because why would I shade myself? That's stupid. But Black men get caught up in this idea that they can't be, an oppressor because racism, because classism. But it's like, so did we just forget about how, they're not all Black men, but there's a number of Black men who are disrespecting the fuck out of Black women? Did we just skip over that whole thing? Did we skip over the fact that there are some Black men, Diddy, 50 Cent, Jay-Z, we'll call names if names have to be said. Anyway, we'll call names, but there's this idea that, because I'm not on your level financially, we have nothing in common. And it's like, no, because as Kanye said in that you still are a nigga in a coupe. You still a nigga in a coupe. It don't matter if you pushing the fresh, whips and chains and stuff like that. You still a nigga in a coupe at the end of the day. You can still get that ass gunned down, arrested, unfairly or whatever. As we just so happened to see with Offset. What was that last week, the week before? Got his ass caught up, or a couple years ago when A$AP Rocky got that ass caught up in Sweden, and then said that whatever was going on in the United States and the Black community ain't had shit to do with him, and all Black people had collective Black confusion. Like, now, excuse me, but then you had to wait on the Tangerine that's 45 minutes from my house to come bail you out. Like, come on now. Or let's take it a step further. How you have Black men who, demonize the LGBT community. It's like, oh, well, that stuff is not okay because it's not normal, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, we're just skipping, jumping over things. And people don't recognize that, or at least, and again, not just Black men, but the Black community as a whole. If you are in a place of quote unquote power, that is where your privilege lies. And I think there's a link that's missing between that. I don't know what the link is, but there's a link missing between that. If that makes sense.
So as I'm listening to you speak the entire time, I said, Privilege. You see how powerful that is? Like, and the thing about white privilege, and being very specific to say white privilege, is white privilege and how they can hide and be saved in that word privilege has allowed those ideas to become indoctrinated into other communities. So anybody can use their privilege to the detriment of someone else. And I say that to say, because even in Black communities, when we say, I'm going to do the work and I'm going to go back to the community and I'm going to help my community and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Hold up. What are you really trying to do? What are you really saying? How are you going to do this work? Because the community that you came from influenced who you are today. So why are you trying to rob the community of that? What can you bring and show your community that was missing for you, or that you had to find someplace else? Don't destroy your community for the cultural and historical richness of what it has been. Do not become a white savior. Black folks fall victim to white saviorhood all the time because our power structure is white centered. And that's all we know. And so even when we think about, I ask the question all the time in class when people say African American culture, please tell me what that is. Please tell me what that is. And this is somebody who identifies as African American all my life. I ain't got no other country connection. I'm straight American. I'm like, please define for me what that is. And just like, who said it? Was it Baldwin? Was it Malcolm? Everybody has said it. Like, you literally adopt the culture of your oppressor, and you have to learn to break away from that. And that's why even when I speak on Black privilege and Black people push back on it, because Black people will push back on it in a minute and they'll say, you're not privileged, you're blessed. You're right, I am blessed and highly favored, because I'm a religious person too. You're right, I am blessed. And you use blessed because I'm not connected to power. But there's also power dynamics in saying that I'm blessed, because let's think about Christianity in the United States. It also follows a Eurocentric model. Like, people need to read Stamp from the beginning. People need to read Stamp from the beginning and see that racism was not, we say it is a social construct, but at the founding of this country, it was weaved into the fabric of this country. So this country was never built on ideals that weren't racist. Like, our ideals have been racist. And it's so weird that I'm having this conversation with you today, because we're working on this project for class, and I'm over here trying to unpack how am I going to present it and what am I going to say, because I know it can ruffle feathers. It can even ruffle feathers for people that consider themselves Afrocentric and down for the cause. It's like, hold up, you came off a little too strong. I had a meeting with my own advisor today, because I'm also a graduate assistant, and he said, how can I help you? And I said, I am excited. Dr. Bettina Love is speaking to us tomorrow. I love her work. She talks about abolition. She talks about how racism is in the fabric of education. We put across policies and reforms, but policies and reforms for who? Why is everything targeted towards Black and brown people? I mean, we go to Howard, everyone uplifts Brown versus Board of Education. But let's be real, it was done to Black and brown people. It wasn't in reverse. So when we talk about segregating schools, ain't no white person getting on a bus coming to a school in a Black neighborhood. Like, why is it that we always have to go to them? They should also realize, hey, I should learn about how the other half lives. Oh Lord, my history teacher hat came on right then. The only time that book mattered was because it showed how other white people were living in this country. But now we need to extend the other half to, hold up, Black folks. Black folks. I'm also going to talk about Michael Dumas. Like, this is going in so many different directions. But I'm also going to talk about Michael Dumas in my presentation in class, and I learned about a framework called Afro-pessimism. And it made me sit back and think, and I was like, wait, I say I'm Afrocentric with a socio-political lens. I was like, but this Afro-pessimism makes sense. And it's hard to fathom because when you look at language, it's like, I'm not pessimistic about Black folks. So what does that mean to be an Afro-pessimist? What it means is saying, yo, United States, you don't see Black folks as human, you still see us as slaves.
Woo!
It's also saying, United States, when you put across reforms, you now use the lens and the angle of diversity. So now you have schools that might be predominantly white, but you have one Asian kid in there. So now you can say I'm a diverse institution. So you could still cut the Black people out of the conversation. I'm like, oh, come on, Michael Dumas, teach me and inform me on this. So again, privilege is too safe of a word for white folks. And I don't know what is the word, like supremacy fits, like white supremacy fits because they feel that they are supreme. And that is what they operate in. Privilege is just saying, I'm a little bit better than the next person. Like, let's really take that what it is. Privilege is just being able to say, I might be a little bit better. I might have a little bit more. And because we live in a capitalist society, like I have a little bit more means a whole lot. But hiding in privilege is what white folks are doing. And it allows Black people, and let's add the conversation of diversity, brown people to be able to say, I'm always going to be in the have-nots because I don't have resources. I don't have money. I can't afford bread. I can't afford to send my kid to school. I was watching Waiting for Superman again last night, like years later, and looking at the book again in line with this project. And I was furious, like crying watching this movie, as I knew the scene with the lottery and the kids not getting it and the one kid getting lucky. But I'm like, Black and brown kids aren't lottery numbers. Like, you're making us statistics. And you're putting the burden on why we can't be successful on us. Like, that is what reform is doing, because you're putting the standard is always white, and it's always, as we talked about recently, suburban white. So you're putting our life standard on that, and so you're blaming me for where I live. You're blaming me for how I move, and I have to be in this world because of how I was subjugated from the beginning of time in this country. It's not my fault. And you can't keep putting band-aid solutions on things and think that is the answer, and then think, well, as Jared Kushner said the other day, Black folks, we can't want it more than you. Excuse me, sir, what? We want to live every day. We want to be successful every day.
I mean, you preached a sermon in that, right? I mean, because there's so many different points that we could even go to with this, because and I 100% agree with the idea of language being the problem, because what people fail to realize is that just because something is written, that doesn't mean that was the way that it was supposed to be interpreted. And not only that, it doesn't mean that it was supposed to be accepted as gospel truth. And that's where a lot of people mess up. And it makes me think back to, forgive me, y'all, we mix in some of our conversations from class into this, but it all connects and it makes sense. It comes back to this. It reminds me of the conversation that we were having in class yesterday when we were talking about, quick background, y'all, we was talking about like school choice and whether or not African-American students should be able to choose whether or not they go to school, where they go to school, what that looks like. And that kind of ties back to what she was saying about Waiting for Superman, which, by the way, if you have not watched that documentary, please do so. I guarantee you it's probably on YouTube somewhere. You can probably find it on Amazon Prime.
It's on Netflix.
It's on Netflix as well. Like, but that if you want to know about what's really going on and why both of us do the work that we do as far as education is concerned, that movie will tell you some of everything. But to go back to what we were talking about yesterday, where we were talking about, the election, and we were talking about what that looks like, and we were talking about, how Donald Trump won and what it may look like for us, and this is that and the third. And one thing that kept coming up, but nobody was saying it, was the idea of language, because what's written in the Constitution, there's this idea that goes back and forth between social studies, anybody, whether it be historians, teachers, practitioners, whatever, that argue whether or not the Constitution is a living document or not. Is it open for strict interpretation or is it loose interpretation? And what the conversation was hinting at is that a lot of people are thinking that it should be a strict interpretation of the Constitution. But the thing is, what people fail to realize is that if that was the actuality in the case of things, there's a lot of things that would not be happening right now in 2020. And that's 100% facts. And if that was the case, which it is, y'all just don't recognize it, you gotta go about 4 paragraphs down in the Constitution, there's a clause that says in order to account for both taxes and the number of people with the exception of Indians and other groups, I can't remember the exact language, should be taxed 3/5 of other persons. What does that mean? It means the 3/5 clause is still in the Constitution on November 2020. And so while people were talking about, well, what does it say about this, and the president can't do this, and this is and the third, actually, no, he can. There's a lot of things that he can do that y'all just don't know about, but it's all because of the language. And it's interesting that people don't realize that how much language, like think of if we break it all the way back down, for all my English nuts out there, for my writers, for my English teachers, y'all know about homonyms and homophones, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's spelled the same but have 2 different meanings, where it sounds the same but 2 different spellings. Mm-hmm. Think about how confusing that is for somebody who's an immigrant just coming over here and they don't understand it. Think about how difficult that was for you when your mama told you to spell grateful, because I remember my mama made me go get a dictionary to spell grateful, but the word grateful is spelled great like a cheese grater. Mm-hmm. Whereas the other word grateful is Great. And it's like, that doesn't make sense to me. It never clicked to me. It never made sense to me. So even when you think about language on that sense, or on that level, like you said, white supremacy is a fitting term, because there's this idea of exceptionalism that, oh, I'm better than you because of this, is that, and the third. And every issue that you face is because of your problem and it's your fault. But it's also interesting that you bring it up, because that was in one of the readings that we had to do in the handbook for urban education, where it literally said in like the second paragraph, like the reason why urban schools are a thing is that because white people, and this is paraphrase version, white people assume that the problems that the Black community face, or that the Latinx community face, or that some Asian communities, or anybody that's considered urban, any issues that they face are literally a product of their own. But everybody's just gonna hop, skip, jump over 400 years of slavery. We're gonna hop, skip, jump over Reconstruction. We're gonna hop, skip, and jump over Jim Crow segregation. We're gonna hop, skip, and jump over the Civil Rights Movement. We're gonna hop, skip, and jump over mass incarceration, and then we're gonna hop, skip, and jump over the bullshit that's happening right the fuck now.
Oh, thank you.
2010, even with your favorite president, Barack Obama, in office. Like, we have to, y'all are hop, skipping, and jumping over a lot of different people, but y'all don't realize that it's their same language that people tell us that, oh, slavery was a long time ago, get over it, but you must remember 9/11. Like,
hold up. And the fact that we have, 500 and some odd kids that can't be reconnected with their parents right now.
Okay.
Hello, United States, we had to apologize to Japanese people for when we did that. Now, let's also talk about how, so we just gonna become Nazis? Because I can't say it any other way. That's what the country is moving as. And I'm not saying that's Black folks that are doing it, but clearly the temperature of the country is saying, hold up, Black folks, we put somebody that look like you in office. Don't get ahead of yourself. Mm-hmm. Remember, this history of this country ain't about you. So we're gonna bring it back to its roots. And to give context, I sent Charles the text today. So we can't talk about culturally relevant trainings, educations, bias, implicit bias, all that cannot happen in the federal government anymore. But now you're going to institute an executive order that says we're going to have patriotic education and specifically put patriotic education at 1776. What? So you're really trying to go back in time, back to the founding and the originality of this country when everyone else is void.
Exactly. And even when you sent me that, I was just like, but what does he mean by patriotic education? Because depending on the state that you live in, that's already being taught. Because I know the state of Tennessee, as many times as I've had to go and add to my standards.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all know I'm a former social studies teacher. I taught 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. I've taught history, world history, U.S. history, economics, government, taught it all, right? Every single class that I have taught, I've had to go and add to the standards. So if you in the South, you ain't got nothing to worry about. That's already been a thing. But the issue that is being had here is, again, the language. Mm-hmm. Because when you say patriot education, folks don't look at it, they don't say, oh, what's wrong with that? That could be, something great. We're just talking about the greatness of America. But let's just rewind the clock just a little bit right there. Because in the same greatness, that exceptionalism, that's Western supremacy that is the United States, let's not forget the United States had a lot of fucked up shit that happened to other foreign countries, and not even just the folks that was living on this soil. Do we forget the Cold War? Did we forget Vietnam? Did we forget Korea? Vietnam, we shouldn't even been part of. Korea, we really should have minded our black ass business. But you see how they're panned out. Let's go. Okay, so let's leave Southeast Asia. Let's go east to the Middle East.
Actually, it's so funny that you're saying this because I'm like, we already know he's dumb. I don't say his name. That's why I keep saying he's. We already know he's dumb. And he said patriotic education, and we're going back to 1776, which meant his family would be still on a boat or not allowed to come here if we're going back to 1776. And he's decided to define it as patriotic education, which means you're really talking about the Civil War when we define people as patriots or not. And patriots were those that were considered from the North, but that's clearly telling me that you still believe in the Confederacy. But I'm not surprised because I knew that about you already. But it's almost like, thank you for, again, my history teacher hat is on, of putting it out there in text of how dumb you are, because you ain't even get the year right for what you were talking about when saying patriotic education.
Interesting how that plays out, huh? And so now when we talk about this concept of privilege, because it was another piece that I wanted to get to, was still kind of in their context of language. It's interesting. Everybody's favorite person that they love to hate, the minister, Honorable Louis Farrakhan, Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said this in his address at the top of this year. I want to say it wasn't Savior's Day. It was, I don't know. I remember it was hot outside when he made this address. It was in the summertime. But he literally said when people call him a racist, he doesn't get bothered by that, because a racist, if you add an ist to any end of a word, that's somebody that thoroughly practices that idea, that concept, whatever. He said, I'm known as a violinist because I play the violin. And so being a violinist, my practice is playing the violin. When people call me a racist, these are his words, you can go back and look for them yourself. He said, when people call me a racist, I don't find a fault with it, because you damn right I'm down with the black folk, and I'm down with my people, and I'm down for their liberation. And so when you call Donald Trump, or you call Betsy DeVoe, or you call Steve Mnuchin, whoever you want to call, I don't know, call whoever a racist, that terminology is not necessarily incorrect, because that's what they practice. They practice exceptionalism and think that, oh, my race is better than you because of things that we came up with. And this is how to sound a lot familiar to a lot of people right now. The same things that we are saying that we're great off of is what we tell you that you suck at. Think about your time in K-12 education. Think about all the times where your teacher told you weren't gonna be shit. It's a whole bunch of rappers that's going off right now saying preach right now because your mama told you that you want shit or your teacher told you that you weren't gonna be shit or whatever, whatever, whatever. Think about the language that's used there, right? What were those parameters? What were those parameters that you've been judged off of? It's the exact same thing as what Leanna just said. As far as like the language that's being used here, y'all we got to get past the surface bullshit, and that's what keeps happening is that we get stuck on the surface bullshit. But I even think that in itself is a form of privilege, is to be able to get caught up in that surface bullshit. Because you can, it's one thing to me to be willfully ignorant, but it's also a blessing and a curse to be quote unquote woke or conscious or to have knowledge of self, have gnosis, have whatever you want to call it. It's a blessing and a curse, but at the same time, you have to understand that there's privilege in that as well. And I don't think people get that either. And that's on both sides. White people got that shit bad. But it's some black folk that don't seem to get that and don't seem to understand how much that language can make or break you, if that makes sense. And it can determine a lot about where you're going, where you come in, and where you feel like you're gonna go and what you think you're gonna do, if that makes any sense to anybody that's watching and listening. I know I talk in circles, but whatever.
I mean, it's even funny to hear you say that because there is, for folks that aren't white, assimilation is what is expected of all people. White assimilation towards whiteness is expected of all people in order to reach a standard and have social acceptability, which is why I have a love-hate relationship with charter schools. So I say that to say is that homegirl that got up there and spoke to the Kansas Police Board, and she said, "I'm not here, I'm not nice, and I'm not about respectability politics." I said, "Preach, baby, preach."
She had a read, and y'all can see what my shirt says, the read. That is what she had, was a read for that ass. If you ain't watched that, that wasn't even a clap back. She gathered them together so effortlessly. If you haven't seen that, hit pause on this, open up a new tab, and go watch that, and then come back to this. Because if you don't need any other blessing over your life right now, you need that read right now. You need, especially on, because we're recording this on election day. So if you need a blessing after you watch this and that, just go watch her, because I'm sorry, continue.
But it's the reason why she blessed me is, just like you said, there are privileges on both sides, and there are privileges that I have had to position me to be closer to a table, which unfortunately has pushed me further away from other tables. And when I say, and I'm honoring them as tables because they are tables. The conversation that I might have with homie around the way, or the uncles, or people in the park playing ball, or people out there playing dice, or like, they have their tables, and some of them are the dopest philosophers, lawyers, give me all the tea, the business of the neighborhood, how to run, do what I need to do. To be in the space of where even we are in academia, like, has, I wouldn't say made the conversations more difficult, but it makes it makes it challenging, because I'm not trying to assimilate, but our educational structure, in order for me to be successful, I had to practice certain social norms. But then also in terms of recognizing and honoring, again, the culture of my community and wanting to uplift my community, which brings me back to the point of saying, it's not a thing of me coming back, because I ain't never left. I always keep an ear to the ground, but the way I engage is different, and I have to be cognizant of that. I have to be cognizant of, Leanna, check yourself right now. Like, as they used to say back in the old, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Because turn it off, be your authentic self, be your unapologetic self, and people in both communities will honor you and recognize you for that. I will be in white spaces and corporate spaces, and I'll clearly get tired of playing the game to the point like I don't play the game anymore. And there's pushback there, but I've still been socialized in a way that they can still tolerate me, even though I don't hold my tongue as much anymore. But then when I come back into my own community, it's like, all right, we see you bred, you were raised this way, or this was the expectation, or look at college girl or Miss Highly Educated or blah 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 blah. I'm like, I might have the paper, but you still got a whole lot of teaching to do for me. Like, you're the one that needs to impart knowledge and information on me. And I have to remember when I engage in those conversations, as long as I'm true to, again, me, that I'm accepted in that space too. I think a lot of what happens, especially people that, it's funny because the idea of Black privilege and where Black privilege becomes problematic keeps coming back into like the way I feel about this part of the conversation. And that's really the socialization of privilege, right? It's like a hierarchy of privilege. What happens is that people feel that I've assimilated to a degree, so I have to keep this assimilation pattern. And now when I go back, it's like you no longer assimilate, you go down. And that's literally the thought process. It's like, let me water this down real quick. I'm not going to water it down. The same way that I'm going to talk to them is the same way I'm going to talk to you. So as my mother would say, my grandmother said, shit or get off the pot, right? Like, if we're going to engage in conversation, I'm not watering anything down because I have faith in you as my community that you understand what I'm saying, where I'm coming from, how I'm expressing it. And if you don't, ask me a question. And if I need to explain it to you the way I would have explained it maybe when I was 16 years old, so be it. And we say and we play on this idea of that's code switching. It's not really code. I really hate the term code switching because I am who I am. Like, it's not this idea of me turning it off and be like, yo, what's good? Like, this is how I'm gonna be, like, whatever. Like, I'm like this all the time. I'm really just sitting straight up right now because this belt has me all together and gathered, right? But all the time, like, I let my hair down. I have the conversations. I'm gonna talk to white people the same way I talk like this. And if I get riled up in a situation, do you think Leanna from Brooklyn don't come out? Leanna from Brooklyn comes out at all times. And it's funny, even in my introduction, I didn't even write I'm from Brooklyn, but I wear Brooklyn like it's the biggest badge of honor. And again, talking about social privilege and hierarchy, like where I'm from, people in Brooklyn remind me all the time, it's like, you this kind of girl because you're from there. And I'm like, I get you, and I might not have had your experience. But there's this thing of being from Brooklyn that no matter what, I understand that fabric. Like, I understand, Charles knows I hate the word grit, but I'm using it in the sense of like, I understand the grit, the raw, the realness, the hustle and bustle. Like, I understand that because that's what I was bred. That was how I maneuvered. And it's so interesting because now this is where my brain goes to with words and semantics, how society, and this is robbing from Black culture again, uses words that Black people have used to describe themselves forever. Black people have said, I'm gritty, I'm raw, I'm cut, I'm hard, I'm hustler, I do the work, I get things done, like nothing can stop me. And then you tell me in an education space or in a space of where I'm trying to reach and be successful and climb and have a career and more than a job, that I need to be gritty and resilient. I've been gritty. I've been resilient from the day of my birth, because to be Black is to be born political.
Woo! Girl, you better preach. We might need to take a 30-second praise break behind that one. If you just need 30 seconds to run across your living room or across your driveway or wherever you were watching this, across your church, if whatever you go to. Because that in itself is a conversation that needs to be had about black privilege as a whole and what that quote unquote looks like. Because I think, and it's interesting that you brought that up, because I've had to check some people with the same amount of gusto that you had as far as Brooklyn is concerned. Anybody that know me, and know me well, y'all know I rep Memphis till the day that I die, because I love my city to death. Was born and bred there, Memphis breeds hustlers. Like, I don't care what you say. Like, if you don't learn nothing else, if you grew up in the city of Memphis, you know how to hustle. It don't matter if you out here selling dope, if you out here, making easy money, pimping hoes and style. It don't matter if you out here hustling, getting this book, getting this education, making your paper, doing whatever you got to do. We all bred, like all of us are hustlers in the city of Memphis. And I've had to check people, even some family members, had to check them on there where they say, I was told that I talk white. And I was like, don't let me, being at this institution, fool you. You can take the boy out of Memphis, but you can't take the Memphis out the boy. It's still nuck if you buck whenever you get ready.
Hey, I've been ducking and bucking and ready to fight.
Because as she said, I come in the club, shaking these dreads, throwing these bowls and busting these, let's not get it twisted, because it can still go down like it's North Memphis, like it's Chelsea and Woodlawn, like it's Raleigh Fraser. It can go down, but I'd rather not have to do that if I don't have to. But the thing is, I feel like a lot of people, black people, especially once they get to this level of elitism, there's another ism right there, right? Where they think that because I have the papers, because I have the degrees, because I have the letters behind my name, because I have the money, because I have the cars, because I have the chains, because I have the whips, because I have the girls, because I have the guys, because I have whatever, that it makes you better than the other person that was literally living next door to you, in some cases, living downstairs or upstairs from you. And it's like, no, that's not, it doesn't have to be that way. But I think the problem where that comes into play, and this is something that I've been kind of postulating since like the summertime, with this idea of capitalism and how capitalism has literally had an impact on every single thing that we've had in our country as a whole, even before the United States was founded, as the Confederate States of America, even before that, before the Pilgrims got over here, all of this shit was based in capitalism. And what I posed to somebody, shout out to B-Lo, he was saying, which first of all, he told me that I managed to convince him. So maybe that one teacher of ours actually did do something of benefit. That's shade. Let me not be shady like that. But anyway, but I've been postulating this idea that like the difference between collective economics and capitalism. And we talked on this show before briefly about Powernomics and Claude Anderson's, thought process and ideas about that, which, by the way, if you have not gone and got that book and read it, need to go do that. If you need a copy of it, don't tell nobody, but I got a PDF version that I'm willing to send to you. Don't tell nobody, but, I'm going to do that for y'all because we cool like that.
When you get it, buy it directly from Claude Anderson's website, because that's something he would say. Don't try to buy it from Amazon.
Okay, so if you want to...
somebody else.
Exactly.
If you want to buy Claude Anderson's book and be about power and Black economics, buy it directly from the source.
Because, we support Black business around here. I mean, y'all see I got my Reed hoodie on. They Black, we supporting this business. But anyway, so we were talking about the idea between capitalism and collective economics. And what I told him, I said, here's the difference between, like, people don't understand how much of a trickle-down effect capitalism has outside of just finances. I said, capitalism tells you that you have to be qualified, certified, have X, Y, and Z in order to be recognized, to have status, to be worthy, to be any of that. Whereas collective economics tells you that whatever you bring to the table is good enough, right? What does that mean? Collective economics says that if I am a teacher and you are a seamstress, if I teach your kids for 5 days a week, you trade me, I'll trade you the suits that I need to wear every day to work for you to patch them up, fix them, hem them, do whatever. Or even better, if you're a farmer and, you know, I copyright, edit it, and you're trying to write a book. You give me your book to edit, and I'm gonna go ahead and knock that out, and you trade me some oranges, some apples, and whatever else you got on your farm, right? But it's what I bring to the table is good enough to barter and trade with somebody else. Whereas capitalism says, no, girl, you have to have this, and this in order to be quote unquote successful. And I think that's where Black people get this idea of, going back to what you said earlier about how there's power in privilege, or how there's influence in privilege, that once you get enough status, you have enough influence. But what is that not? Power, because you're still lacking the one thing or the several things that you need in order to be considered powerful. And the best example of that, and you know, he kind of alluded to this in an interview, is Kanye. Because Kanye said it in multiple songs. He was like, you know, in order for me to have status, you know, wait till I get my money right, then you can't tell me nothing. His money went bad, went left real quick. But he managed to see what that looked like. He thought that I had to have this level of notoriety. I had to have this status. I had to marry this white woman. I had to do all these different things in order to be considered somebody, but only to still realize that niggas is still gonna look at you sideways and look at you like you're crazy. And so when you get to the point of trying to have conversations with people in the hood, I think people need to come off that high horse, and still speak to people. Like you just said, still speak to people like we grew up around each other. Like even when I went back to North Memphis and I talked to kids that lived in the area that I grew up in, I've been talking to them like, oh, and if you look at this, you're going to have this, and your homework is to. I wasn't snooty with my nose up in the air. I kept it real with my students, and I was like, look here, pimp, let me tell you what this really is. When you take your happy Black ass outside the four walls of these schools, let me tell you what X, Y, and Z is getting ready to happen, because I'm a real nigga just like you at the end of the day.
Charles.
I'm sorry, did I hit a nerve?
No, I knew you were where you were going with that, but let me give you the Jesus, why he came to mind. Because I immediately thought, like, yes, we have all these things. I mean, to be honest, why am I getting a doctorate? Because the work that I want to do, I know I can do it now, right? My community would embrace me doing it now. But the person that I need to sit at the table with would literally say, but she don't have a doctorate. I can't have this conversation with her, right? So I'm literally doing this because I need to be sitting at that table. That's the table that I want to be sitting at. But if I can't still have the conversations with my community, my work means nothing, because I could be doing everything and become so far removed and so far detached. Who am I fighting for? And then it becomes to a point that now I'm fighting for myself. And then guess what? Tables turn, because they already think that I don't belong there. So when they realize, oh, hold up, we got her here too much, and now she's a little too powerful, then they say, okay, we're done with you. So then where do I turn to? And what that made me think of was good old Tiger Woods.
Ooh.
Good old Tiger Woods. All my life, knew he was a Black man. And I guess Tiger Woods always stood out for me. My dad plays golf. I wasn't raised by my dad, but my dad plays golf. And I remember from the time I was a little girl, I told my mother I wanted to learn how to play golf. And so she would always say, you are your dad's child. And it doesn't help that I look like him too. And so like, I was always aware of Tiger Woods and knew Tiger Woods was a Black Asian man. And so again, this level of privilege, you can, as Asian people, align yourself to whiteness. And so the way Tiger Woods, as a Black man, decided to utilize the Asian part of his ancestry to move himself closer to whiteness. But when his world came crashing down, who did he reach out towards? The community that he had denied, or essentially, denied, disregarded, turned his back on, because it's not, Black is a, what did I say? To be Black is to be radical, is to be political from birth. But literally, Black people are the only group that are like, it's funny, I don't even want to use this term because white people use this term. The whole like pull yourself up from your bootstraps thing. I'm like, but Black folks have been doing that all of our lives. And we are the only group of people that will say, it's okay. It's time to come home. And when you come home, we're going to fix it. And we're going to school you real quick and remind you who you are, your strength, your tenacity, the privilege that Blackness affords you because of that strength and tenacity, so that you can therefore pick your head up and get to work and do what you need to do again. It's always Blackness that reinstills in you a sense of strength, nothing else. So Tiger had to turn back and realize, hold up, that same group of people that I had moved from and alienated myself from are the only people that are willing to accept and embrace me, even when I did not do the same for them, and will build me up and help me get back to where I once was.
That's a word. And it's true. It's 100% true. And I think that what we have to do as a community, and I don't want to speak for everybody, I'm going to speak for me and my little corner of this community, is that we have to understand that your Blackness is your saving grace for the community. However, we also need to give people space to grow in that. Because what a lot of people, and we also got to stop this groupthink mentality too. I'm sorry, we can be groupthink on some stuff, but not everything. Like Jesus, y'all are free to think on your own. Please think while it's still free. Please do that. Like, please still use Google while it's still free. Like, please do it. But you know, we have to stop with this groupthink mentality that just because you're Black that you have to think and look a certain way, that you have to believe these certain things, and you have to be on board with this. Now, some stuff like pedophilia, no, we all need to be on the same page with that.
We good.
We all need to be on the same page with that. That shit don't fly. Causing harm to men or women, we all need to be on the same page. That don't need to be happening. Now, your religious beliefs, that's a whole different ballgame. Your sexual preferences, that's a whole different ballgame. Your political beliefs, whole different ballgame. We ain't got to discuss them, just long as what you feel, think, or believe doesn't cause harm to somebody else. That's where it has to be. And folks don't get that, and folks don't understand that. And so to wrap up this conversation about privilege, I do want you to talk about your apparel line and talk about all the other great things that you got going on, because again, we highlighted a Black woman and all the great stuff that she's doing. And so I want her to have a space and opportunity to talk about all those great things. But to put a nice bow on this concept and this idea of privilege, because I think we did hit a lot of things on here. And if there's some stuff that you are confused about, y'all know I put the little sermon notes up like they do at church. I put it up on a little PowerPoint screen so you can see while the preacher is talking. But if there's anything that you didn't understand, Google is still free, girl. Go use it. So, and I know that's privileged in itself, because you gotta know how to use Google, but damn, you can literally just type in, what the fuck does this mean? And Google will be like, here are several 100,000 different ways of what this could possibly mean. But to wrap up this idea of this conversation of privilege, I honestly think that, and this will be the last thing I say, and you definitely have your last moments. I honestly think that with this concept of privilege, Black folks need to understand that even though we don't have privilege in race, you still have privilege. That's the bare bottom line. Think about all of the different things that make you different from somebody else. And this is what I told people when I did their bulletin board back in the day. Think of all the ways that make you different than somebody else. Now think of all the ways that those differences between y'all, how many of those things could you get away with, quote unquote, could you get away with? And how many of those things could, let's say, your brother or your sister or your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your mama, whoever, how many of those different things, if you were in the same boat, would you be chastised for? So I'll give you the example. I'm a Black male, okay? What am I gonna be chastised for? Being Black? What do I have privilege for? Being a man. Cool. Now let's add a layer onto that. I'm also bisexual. So how does that work out? What am I going to be chastised for? Because I'm part of the LGBT community some days. Not all the time, some days. Like, what does that look like for you? And you have to sit down and unpack that and think about what that looks like for yourself, but then take it a step forward. How is it that you contribute to the fuckery? How do you contribute to the bullshit? How do you contribute to the naysayers and those people who have an issue with those differences, who are in the quote unquote minority group, which that's a term that needs to be unpacked as well. But how do you contribute to those things? I'm not gonna do it. She laughed for a reason, y'all. I'm not gonna do this for her today. I'm not. I'm gonna go right on.
I'm sorry. It hit a chord in my moment of incidents this semester.
I knew. We see each other but I'm not gonna go there. But with that being the case, like I said, put a nice little bow on it. Like that's what needs to that honestly legitimately needs to happen in order for us to progress as a community forward. Because if not, that's like I tell people all the time, y'all be expecting black folk, and black folk be doing this too, the elite black folk be doing this, to be on the same page. But y'all got to realize niggas ain't even on the same chapter. Niggas ain't even got the book. Niggas don't even know where to go find the book. Niggas didn't even know that the book existed. So when you think about all those different layers and nuances to that, take that and apply it to several different things and understand that at least the whole premise, for what I created this platform for is because we're not a monolith. There's a reason why people say that. We got that? Cool. To Leanna, your final points, thoughts on privilege.
First and foremost, because you said that, and then my brain went back to language again because I thought of a word that uses another word. I would say think of the things that strengthen you. And I say strength because Black people always play on strength because we play on religion also, right? What strengthens me? So the thing that strengthens you, it could be the thing that gives you a sense of purpose, motivates you, moves you forward, what propels you. And the language part comes into what empowers you. You don't need to have power to be empowered, right? So what is the thing that empowers you to move forward? That is the thing that you have privilege in. And it's fascinating. I mean, this is a whole nother conversation that you and I have started to talk on. But again, my lens is very Afrocentric. And so when I think about what I'm fighting for Black people. I don't care where you fall on that spectrum. I don't care what community, what identity. I am fighting for Blackness. And it's interesting because a lot of the people, I mean, even the person that I'm like, whose reading I'm admiring now, advocates and comes from a Black queer lens. And for me, because my lens is very Black, like it's always, I wouldn't say hard, but again, in my privilege, I realized like, okay, the reason why things are being defined this way is because people have been left out and don't have privilege because of a result of those things. And because then I started to say like, so the part that I fit in is Blackness, because even someone said to me last night, having a conversation of like, let's talk and have like the Black and the queer and the feminist point of view. And I said, it's interesting because I don't define myself as a feminist either, but I'll engage in conversations about women and women's rights and advocating for that. But that could also be a lens of, because feminism always came from a white point of view. And so for me, the way that I move and am in this world is in my lane, in the lane of Blackness, because that is the area for me that has been the most marginalized. And if I'm fighting for Blackness, fighting for womanhood is a part of that. Fighting for my LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters is a part of that. The problem, as you say, comes from where people are like, I'm fighting for Blackness, but you're a little bit too different. So you're not completely fighting for blackness, because if I'm fighting for blackness, I'm fighting for every single person that is a part of this community. You look at me and be like, Leanna, I'm black. I said, word, let's have this conversation. Like, what's going on? Like, what you need? Because I'm down for the cause. But there are other folks that are like, we're not going to engage in these conversations today. This is not the work that we're going to do. And I know that's a whole nother topic, because you and I have talked about that. Like, sometimes it is the identity of people. Identity is the thing that you find yourself rooted in the most. It is, it's your identity. It's how you explain yourself, right? There are other people who look like me that believe that they are a woman before that they are black. And I'm like, yes, you might look at me and see a woman. But for me, the way I look at myself, I see somebody black first, and then I see a woman. So that is how my practice is informed. That is how I view things. So when I talk about blackness, when I talk about privilege, again, it's even in that recognizing my fight for blackness is inclusive of everyone, but sometimes even when I have conversations, have to be very clear with everyone in every identity category that if I'm fighting for blackness, I'm fighting for us all. And it's really because, again, our oppressor has made every identity divisive. And having division among people is the easiest way to keep power. So when people come together to collectively work, it's like, oh, hold up, you're doing too much. So yeah, that's there, because I can keep going on for hours, days, months. I could have a different idea and opinion.
Oh, so you definitely know you're gonna have to come back for a part two, because we like you said, we could continue this conversation all day long. But that last point that you just said right there, as far as coming together, I want y'all to rewind that portion. That was maybe like a 30-second span of what she said. Go back and rewind that, and then think about where we are as a community. Think about where we are politically. Think about where we are just in this pandemic, quote unquote, right? Because the one thing that the recurring theme that I've noticed literally since, I'm gonna say, December 27th of 2019. And I literally said this, and this has been the theme for the past almost 365 days, because we're almost coming up on a year on that. I literally have been saying, if nothing else, this year is the year for you to figure yourself out. It's for you to get yourself together, get your household in order. And when I say household, I don't mean the four walls around you. I mean your mental, your physical, your spiritual, your spatial, your emotional, all of this. Get all of that together, because at some point in time, it may not feel like it may not seem like it, but I've been feeling it, in my being for a good minute at this point, and several other people have said that they felt the same. We're getting to a point where you're gonna have to rely on yourself. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna speak too much on that, because I like to watch stuff play out. I like to call it out and watch it play out as it happened, as I did with Donald Trump. But like everybody's favorite racist said before, you have to be the change that you want to see. And so if you want to see the change happen in the community, in, the nation as a whole, it's gotta start here. It's gotta start here. It's gotta start here. And if it doesn't start there, you're a lost cause at that point. I'm sorry, I can't help you. You have to want it, just like she said earlier. Black people, you gotta want it bad at work, gotta want it badder than we do. You gotta want it badder than the rest of the community, because nobody's gonna hold your hand through this. I'm sorry, even as an educator, I don't hold my kids' hands through doing anything. I'm gonna give you the directions and tell you what you need to do. And if you have questions, by all means, come ask. But what I'm not getting ready to do is to walk you through this. I'm not Jesus in the footprints allegory. You're going to see one set of footprints and they will be yours. It will not be mine because I won't be there with you. And no, I won't be carrying you either. So there's that on that. So last thing, I know, I'm sorry, I got onto a whole, again, I told y'all know I will bring a word in here on today. So the last thing that we got before we get up out of here is I want you to talk about this apparel company that you have, Fruit of My Ancestors. What is that? What does it look like? Where does it come from? And how can people support it? Because God damn it, if you hoes don't go support, and yes, I'm calling you hoes, because hoes is gender neutral. If you hoes don't go support a Black woman, I feel disrespected. And that's that.
I was looking around because I'm like, wait, I don't have anything. I thought about wearing something. But Instagram at Fruit of My Ancestors or fruitofmyancestors.com. So in my previous life prior to this, I was a history teacher and a special educator. I will also say it has taken 2 years, the past 2 years, for me to be able to say I'm a historian. I don't know why it's only in those past 2 years, because I've been investigating my family history probably since I was about 7 years old. I've always been interested in that. And oddly enough, I started a project probably when I was 10, like really investigating family history, that has turned into is it a 7 or 10 part like yearbook series related to my grandmother, her children, like the larger, like, and this is just my mother's line, not even my father's line, because I've done that work too. I can trace my history back to some of the white folks. And what's interesting with that is people assume my mother is the dark skinned one, my father is the light skinned one. So people assume that when I say that, I'm tracing my father's history. I'm tracing my mother's history. I could trace my mother's history back to the kings of Scotland. My father's history, oddly enough, I can only trace to I have a record on Ancestry.com of where he was sold when he was 13 years old, like coming off the boat. And that is and this is how people need to understand. We talk about slavery is so far away. For me and my family, it's not. So it's me on my mother's side, me, my mom, my grandmother and her sister's generation, and then my so my great grandfather was an overseer on a plantation, right? So I'm like, that's my fourth finger in, like me, my mother, my grandmother. So my great grandmother, no. So my fifth finger in, my great grandfather was an overseer on a plantation. Now talking about my father's side of the family, me, my dad, his father, 4 fingers in. This is the man that the only record I can find of him is when he was sold at 13 years old. And he is the only ancestor that I can find that, like, literally, whenever they wrote it down, says country of origin is Africa. Everyone else will say Georgia, North Carolina, the way that they made Black folks breeding grounds. He is the only ancestor that has said Africa. So for me, slavery is not far removed, which is why my company is Fruit of My Ancestors. Everything that I do has been informed by my own history. And then even as I think and learn about different people, realizing my tenacity and who I am really comes from them. My mother learned about my mother always knew her father, but never confirmed who her father was until really 2 years ago via DNA test. Oddly enough, found out I went to high school with a cousin of mine and had no clue. And we ended up working together as teachers. I transferred and went to a different school. I get a phone call that, hold up, we're related, we're cousins. That opened up to so many different doors that my radical fighting for Blackness ended up me learning that my grandfather wrote a book back in the 1950s, learning that there, Charles, we talked about unions, and no, we didn't talk about unions. In my HR class, we talked about unions recently. And my grandfather was a part of, he was a dock worker. And so back in New York, there were no Black people as a part of unions. And he applied many, many, many times to become a part of a union. And on the last time that he finally applied, he and another Black person applied. And I found all this out because someone wrote about my grandfather's story in their book as they were evaluating unions. And my grandfather and another Black person applied. And because my grandfather had just converted to Islam, for same political reasons, similar to Malcolm X, kind of let's be inclusive of everyone experience, and I don't want to hold up a white savior model. The union realized they needed Black people, and so the other guy was a Christian Black person. So they denied my grandfather's application to the union again, but accepted the other Black guys. And in this book, the man says, if it hadn't been for my grandfather's name is James Hezekiah Overton, and he ended up changing his name to Bey when he converted to Islam. So James Hezekiah Overton Bey, it said if he had not kept applying to unions and then eventually converted to Islam, at that point, there would still have never been a Black person as part of unions and changing what that industry looked like for when that other Black man applied. And it was because he had been that radical person that opened up this door for this other person. So when I tell people I'm not new to this, I'm true to this has been in my bloodline. And it's what strengthens me, which is also why I am the fruit of my ancestors.
Wow. I mean, that I can't even begin to tell you how amazing that is. Like,
I was a geek. Like I Googled my grandfather's name, and I was like, like you Google people all your life. But then I was like, wait, sir, you're in a book? And the author's still alive that wrote the book? What? Because you passed away, what is it, 20, 40 years ago. So now I'm over here, I'm like, somebody tell me about this man. Like, what did he do? And to realize, like, nah, you about this work? About it. I have a cousin. It's so funny, again, because we're in this process of like getting a doctorate degree and realizing that the conversations that I want to have, the country acts like it's ready for it, but I don't feel like the country's ready for it. I have a cousin who her name is May Mallory, and you could kind of Google her and find information about her, but it was always like hush hush, because even back there in the civil rights movement when Eisenhower had, and what I'm gonna say, Eisenhower and Hoover, and having all of the FBI like folders on people. There's an FBI folder out there on my cousin, May Mallory. And people have done work, and she was also instrumental in making sure, I wouldn't say making sure, because her whole guys wasn't integration again. It was about access to resources and making sure that they were in the classroom for her student. Because I've gone to seminars where people talked about my cousin. And again, when you're a kid, you take this for granted, because when she was alive, I wasn't having these conversations with her. And I was reading a book the other day, and I jumped up out of the bed and I said to my mom, I said, now today is when I need her alive, because today I need to have these conversations with her, because today I need to do this work, and I need to understand like how I need to move and how I gotta hide. Because she definitely had to do the go to Africa and hide and do like the everybody else from that time period. But that's what this work unfortunately requires, because our country is still not ready, and it is election day. And so what tomorrow looks like And what it's going to be, I don't know. But I do say to people that we might be in 2020, but there's a possibility tomorrow we could be back in 1960.
Woo, girl, you said a lot right there. Wow, y'all, I need y'all to go support. I really need y'all to go support. Of course, I'm gonna put the link down in the description box below. I'm gonna put it up here so y'all can see it as well. But I mean, it makes a lot of sense. If nobody got it from, just from this sitting alone, if you haven't figured out why she goes so hard for education, why she goes so hard for what she does, it was made obvious here. It literally was made obvious, because a lot of people have their own reason and rationale for going, hard for things. It's because they didn't know, or it's because they, were never taught something, or it's because they never had an experience about something. So they go for it, wholeheartedly to figure out and research what that is. And because I've now known you for 3 months at this point, we'll almost be made 4.
Almost there.
It'll be 4 eventually, but whatever. It makes sense. A lot of dots connect in the sense of like why you go so hard for what you believe in. And I'm gonna be real with y'all. She is one of 3 radical people in our classes, and apparently I'm one of them. I don't know. I just do my thing. But that's a lie. I ain't gonna say I've never met a Black woman that is just as radical or more radical than I am, because I hear people call me a hotel only like 5 years ago. Like, literally was calling me a hotel, and I'm like, y'all are stupid because y'all don't realize what their word actually translates into, but I'm gonna leave y'all there. But then it's even more stupid because you are bagging on people who went and actually did their research. That makes 0 sense, but go off. But to hear, why you go so hard for what you do and why you are so, what is the word? You are so passionate. And I don't want to use that word in a term of offense, because that's been used for me for many years. But it makes so much sense why you are so passionate about what you go for, and why education is so important, and why we need to be having these difficult conversations, even though some people act like they can't handle them or don't want to handle them. That shade too. Right? It's real shade, but it's conversations that need to be had. But here's the thing: as we discussed before, it takes radical people to make change happen, because again, as El-Haj Malik El-Shabazz said, if y'all don't know who that is, it's the late Malcolm X. You need y'all to know your people. But as he said, and this is something I wanted to bring up earlier, when you stab me and the knife goes in 9 inches, you pulling it out 6 inches is not progress. You pulling the knife out all the way, it's not considered progress. What is progress is when the knife is taken out, the wound is cauterized, it's bandaged up, and I'm healed and nursed back to health. But a lot of us can't do that because the knife is being jabbed in further and twisted and sat there to rust overnight. You get what I'm saying? But to see that, to see the history and the reasoning why you have the fire that you have to go for, I mean, it's radicals like you and like me and like those other people who have been radical right now and throughout history. And I don't mean radical in the sense of like, oh, I'm still gonna toe the line, and not shake the table too much in order to not cause problems. No, we need folks that's gonna actually come in and flip that bitch over. You need to be Jesus in the temple. And if you didn't know Jesus was a shit starter and was a radical, go back and read your Bible, because it is in there. When he went in there and cast everybody else out the temple, he flipped the table. We need some table.
That's a whole conversation of itself, because
we
joke that we're radicals. I don't even consider us radicals, and I guess that's because, like, in the spectrum of how we look at Black people that are having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just, as we say, I'm speaking truth to power. I'm from New York. I'm from Brooklyn. I done told y'all I'm blood. I'm straight cut, no shake. Like, this is what it is. I'm gonna call a spade a spade. I'm gonna call you out. Like, We
And that's
got
what
work
it
to do.
is. Yes, and we have work to do. And my thing is that people want to be coddled and want to be held and want to be the same people that want the knife in their back. I'm not the type of person. No, if I see a knife in your back and I see it's hurting you, I'm gonna go snatch the bitch out, no matter how much it may hurt. Because I would rather you be hurt by what I'm saying because I know it's fact and I know it's true, than to you to be considered to be continued to be coddled by a lie, which is what's still happening right now as we walk into tonight being election night, which y'all have fun with that. I know this is gonna air well after that. I hope y'all had fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you doing whatever you need to do. But as far as me and my household, I ain't giving no energy to that because my energy is not, ain't shit changed since, forever. Since I've been alive, ain't shit changed much. But at the end of it all, it's those radical people that made those moves. It's the reason why MLK got killed. Y'all may think he fought that nonviolent thing and it was all just for show. But remember, there was a point where he shifted.
Because him and Malcolm were becoming real good.
Him and Malcolm was doing this for a good minute, but then they was like, wait a minute.
They were like the bros on the corner. Like, yo, what's good? That's what they were becoming.
That was the what is the Spider-Man meme? Point at you, you point at me, we see each other. Or the dude that was on Hot was look at us. Who would have ever thought? Exactly. So it's like people don't understand, like, it's a reason why those radicals got off. But I need people to not be so afraid of being radical, of being off because they be radical. Because again, that's how shit gets done. Because Orlando Jones said it in American Gods. Anger is good. Anger gets shit done.
I'm not angry. I'm just passionate. I said I'm not angry. I'm just passionate. Because remember, it's language and semantics.
Exactly. At the end of the day, that's literally all it is. So, as we wrap up here today, any last points that you want to throw out there, Miss Pearson? First of all, we got to clap this up, y'all. We legitimately have to clap it up for her because not only did she come and bless y'all with a word, she also showed you that it's possible to go back and trace your people. Because just so y'all know, I was actually over here Googling trying to figure out, okay, now let me find my grandmama real quick because I can't go ask her.
Oh, I like doing it. It's so much fun.
Well, shoot, if you want to make a side hustle out of it, we can get that going too. But is there anything else that you want to share with the class before we get up out of here for today?
I'm about to say right now, no, because we can keep it going.
Right.
But this was fun. I enjoyed myself. And let's do it again.
Definitely. Drop your socials. Where can people find you? Where can they find you? You've already said the apparel, you drop it again, but where can they find you? What's your socials? How can they get in contact with you? All that great stuff. So,
social apparel at fruitofmyancestors.com, www.fruitofmyancestors, I say at fruitofmyancestors.com, Instagram at fruitofmyancestors.com, Facebook, Fruit of My Ancestors, website, fruitofmyancestors.com. I did that same thing again when I said it on Instagram, but it's at Fruit of My Ancestors. My Instagram, I'm in the process of changing it. So my political activism Instagram is at leannalpearson.com. That's leannalpearson. And I said .com again because you could also be on that website, leannalpearson.com.
Hey, turn up. And y'all know where y'all can find me. I'm on Twitter. Sometimes I'm on Instagram. If you find me, great. If not, great. But you know what to do. To like and share this video. Share it to somebody that needs to learn about privilege, that needs a word. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. And if nothing else, like always, y'all be great. And I will see y'all next time on Introspective Thoughts.
Bye, y'all.